In this video, we'll be talking about how you can download the Wing IDE and start to use that for scripting inside of Maya, not only just for writing your code, but also debugging it. If you're not familiar with what the benefits of working with an IDE are, we'll explore that later in the video. There's two main things we need to do in order to get started. Obviously, first, we actually need to get the Wing software installed. And this video won't really go into that too much. I do just want to point out a few things. The first is that there are a few different choices that we have available for us when we're using Wing. There's Wing Personal. If you're tight on money, obviously that's the free choice. If you want to support the company, or after you get used to using the personal version of Wing, you may discover that you want those pro features. And if you choose to support the company and buy a pro license, just realize that there is a non-commercial option available for the hobbyists out there like myself. And so both of those choices are under $100. So choose whatever version of Wing you think you want to use, be it the personal or the pro version, and then go ahead and get that downloaded and installed. From there, we also need to go to GitHub, and I have a link to this down below, but we want to go to the wing-ide-maya GitHub repository. From there, we're going to just scroll down and just click on the wing installer.py file. It's going to download that file. And then you're going to switch over to Maya. Then go ahead and find that installer and drag and drop it here. Now, if the drag and drop doesn't work, I have found cases where if Maya is running in administrative mode or with administration privileges, I should say, the drag and drop does not seem to allow that for some reason. So if that's the case, you can always go ahead and just open up the script editor here and source that script rather than drag and dropping it into the viewport. But let's go ahead and do this drag and drop. So I'm going to do this. And at this point, we'll just hit install. And you'll have some different shell windows pop open here. Just give it a moment while it does its thing. And once we're done, it should tell us that the installation completed successfully. If it did not complete successfully, I'd like to hear why. So please leave a comment in the comments section. And if we go to the script editor, what would be beneficial would be to actually see the error messages here. So if it did fail, it should leave some messages talking about why it failed. Okay, so if everything installed correctly, you will now see a Wing menu at the top with the option to connect. Now that connect will not happen initially until we do some adjustments inside of the Wing IDE as well. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. But before we get to that, I do also want to talk about where the install has actually happened. If we jump over to the Maya folder on Windows or wherever it is inside of the Mac OS or Linux, we can go into the modules, and you should see essentially a Wing definition file for a module here, and we will now have a Wing folder. And if we go inside of that, if we go into the scripts, I just want to point out that if we edit this, you'll see that we open up a command port here, and this is the default command port that Maya uses to allow applications to send commands to it. If you're working at a studio and they have a custom command port, you will need to update this to whatever that number would be. Okay, jumping over to Wing, when you first open Wing, you'll probably see something like this. And there's a few different settings we want to just update inside of Wing. The first one is we want to tell Wing that it accepts incoming connections, so that if we are trying to connect with Maya, the connection will actually be allowed. And we can go to the Edit menu and go to Preferences. Then we can go to the Debugger section. Under there, there's a section here called Listening, and we can say Accept Debug Connections, and we can hit Apply. The other thing that we want to do is we want to point Wing to some extra scripts that come with the Maya module that we just installed. So you'll want to go down to the bottom of the preferences categories, find the IDE extension scripting, and then from here you'll say insert, and we'll say insert here. And I'll just browse. I'm essentially going to go to the Maya location that we had previously. So here I'm inside of Maya. I'll go to modules. I'm going to go to Wing. And then inside of here, we'll go to scripts. Under the Wing module, you will see Wing IDE scripts, and just select this folder. Now, in my case, I've already done it, so I'm going to just hit cancel. So you should see the scripts listed up here. And then what we want to do is we want to tie a hotkey to the script that we want to run inside of Wing. So what this will allow us to do is if we have code visible inside of Wing, we can hit a hotkey and it'll send the code over to Maya to run. So we will go to the user interface under keyboard, you'll see a custom key bindings here. I have it bound to Alt E. The Alt key is going to normally, if we don't have this bound yet, Alt, it will just open up these quick accelerator options here, and then E would normally be popping open the edit window, which is not something I do that often. So what you would do simply is just go in here and say insert, and then choose your hotkey for this. Maybe you want to do Control E instead, and then under command, just start to type run and then in, and you should have a choice of run in Maya, and you can say OK, and then you can hit apply. I'm gonna go ahead and cancel because I already have my hotkey set up. Okay, so at this point, if we're inside of Maya, so let's just jump over there and I say Wing Connect and I jump over to Wing, you'll notice in the bottom left corner that this little bug symbol is green. That means that we are now connected between Maya and Wing. Also, you can right click on this debug and you can stop debugging, pause the debugger. And if I just give myself a little more recording room here, you'll see there's also a shortcut for accepting those debug connections. So you can kind of choose on the fly if you want to accept incoming connections or not. All right, so let's actually talk then about how we might set up and start coding here inside of Wing. All right, so when you're starting to code, you obviously have to make some choices about where you actually want to have your scripts live. And I think that discussion is outside of the scope of this video. I will mention real quickly, I'm a big fan of Maya's module system. So if we're under Maya, we can go to modules and you can see what we can have essentially different. A module really is just like a collection of scripts that work together. So this fspy Maya plugin that I wrote, essentially we have the ability to define icons and plugins. It's like a nice little package you can hand around. But I will mention that I'll have another video because I have tools to allow people to easily create modules and install modules, which is essentially what we use with that drag and drop installer for this particular package. But for this video, what we're going to do is we're just going to set up a simple folder with some information under the Maya scripts folder. So I'm going to go to my scripts folder, which is empty right now, and I'll just create a new folder here called My Project, like so. Back over in Wing, we're going to go to the project window and we're going to say create new project, and we'll say use existing directory. Then we'll just browse to that folder we just created. Okay, so I'm going to go to this location and I'm going to say that my project is at this level. Once again, this kind of gets into the how we organize things. This maybe is not ideal, but for this video, this is how we're going to do it, where I'm going to say that the root of my Wing project is right inside the source of scripts. Ideally, you're doing this kind of in isolation in its own kind of location versus just Maya's scripts. If you do have other scripts in here, you might want to go ahead and actually choose the My Projects as the location of the Wing project to look at. So we'll choose this and I'll say next. And what we want to do is we want to point Wing to the Python executable that is compiled to work with Maya. We don't want to use any other Python version that we might have on our system. So we're going to switch this over to command line and we're going to say browse. From there, we're going to go to wherever Maya is installed. In my case, it's under C, Program Files, Autodesk, Maya 2024 bin. And under the bin, we are going to just select the Maya.py.exe and say that, and we'll create the project. Right away, Wing will ask us if we want to go ahead and save this project. So let's go ahead and save now. And I'm going to save it under that Maya scripts folder. So I'm under Maya scripts. I have my project. And like I said, in my case, there's nothing in the scripts folder. So I'm going to save this next to it. If you are working with a location or on your machine, you have other scripts in here, go ahead and save under this location. And let's go ahead and just call this my project. All right, so now on the right-hand side, we have this project tab. And if we click on that, you'll see the My Project folder. I'm going to right-click on that, and I'm going to say Create New File. And it should automatically take me to here. I'm going to make this an actual Python package. I'll do a init here. And I'll just hit Save. And then let's open this up. And now let's actually create a test file to work with. So I'm going to right-click on this and create new file. And I'll call this like test file. I already have another test file somewhere, so I got to make sure there's not a conflict. Let's do this. Let's do wing example, and I'll hit save. Now we can go in here and we can type something like print hi, and we'll save that, and I can send that command over to Maya. If I do my hotkey, which in my case is Alt E, I'll just hit this, and if we jump back over to Maya, now we should see this print statement here. The other thing we can do, rather than just have it execute the code, if you have a function in your Python script that is called run, then when we execute the code, it will also attempt to run the run function. So obviously, a lot of times we just have a bunch of functions, nothing that would run immediately. So here I'm going to say print running function. We'll save that. I'll hit Alt E, and there we go. Now we can see um, it says we're reloading the module because the module was already imported from the previous execution. And then we're going to run this function, and we see running function. So this is a really nice way if you have, a lot of modules or Python files that you just want to reload, but you don't want them to actually execute anything. You just simply hit Alt E, but then when you have your main files that are actually supposed to execute code, having that run function on there will automatically do that for you. The other thing we can do is we can also send just highlighted text over to Maya to run. So if I do print highlight like so, if you have any text that's highlighted at the time you do the Alt E command, it just copies that text down to a temporary file and tells Maya to run just that file. So here we get just the executed code of what was highlighted at the time. So the hotkey there that run in Maya, if nothing is selected, it will import or re-import the entire module. If something is selected, it's going to just run the selected text. I tend not to just do the selected text that much, but it is an option for anyone who likes that workflow. All right, so in a moment, we are going to actually talk about connecting Wing and Maya through the connect command and how to do some basic debugging. This is really for anyone who's just not all that familiar with an IDE and how to leverage those features. I will talk about a few other quick things too while I'm at it, just kind of my setup and how I have Wing configured. Under the edit menu, there is an option here to say show line numbers. So that's really nice. So when you obviously see an error message just giving you a specific line, you can jump straight to it. Also, you'll notice that I have a dark theme enabled right now. If we go to the edit preferences, we have at the top user interface, and you can choose these different dark or light themes, and then they have some predefined themes here. So I like this Dracula theme. I've tried a bunch of them. I felt like the colors really work for me on this one, so that's the one I use. Another thing is if you are working in a studio environment where you have programmers with you and they're working in Visual Studio, or if you work in Visual Studio, you may want to switch your keyboard personality over to actually be Visual Studio's hotkeys for debugging. I'll talk about that in a moment, but yeah, so you have that option to kind of have some unity in terms of the hotkeys if you're working between different IDEs. So those are some of the configurations that I have enabled. Now I have the actual Wing GitHub project up here so we can just kind of look at how we could debug something. And to start with, I'm going to run back over to Maya, and I'll go ahead and just make sure I'm connected. We'll jump back over to Wing. So we have the green bug that lets me know I'm connected. If you don't have success at this point, there's two things that you'll want to check. The first one is right-clicking on the bug and make sure that you have accept uh, debug connections enabled. The other one is in the Wing debug stub, which so inside of our Wing module that was installed. And once again, that's installed in Maya modules. We'd have Wing, and then under scripts, under Wing there, you'll have this Wing debug stub. This is the script file that comes with the Wing IDE that allows us to connect to Wing. And what can happen if we actually open this up, if you scroll kind of towards the top, there's a section here where the script will try to find where Wing is installed on your system. I've modified it a little bit to search for different versions of Wing. But if it can't find the version of Wing it needs to connect to, then the connection won't happen. So if you are not having success making a connection, you might want to check here and make sure this path matches where your installation of Wing is. Okay, so an IDE, what is some of the features or things it gives us that are worth using them? Let's go over to this installer and we'll just run some code here. So the most obvious one is the ability to create a breakpoint. So if I just click on this, we get this red dot. And the breakpoint pretty much means when the code is going to run, it will actually pause at this location and then I can do things. So let me go ahead and hit my hotkey to run this. And it should have popped up. So let me see what's going on here. Okay, so what happened was I put a breakpoint on my GitHub Wing installer, which is not what Maya is running because I've since installed it. So I need to actually go to the module version of this. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to put this breakpoint here and I'm going to hit Alt-E. And so now our code is run. You know, before I had an IDE, I'm constantly putting print statements in everywhere to kind of see what the value of variables are or what's happening in my code. But now we actually stop on this breakpoint. And we have these different options. If you go into debug, you're going to see there's step into, there's a step out of, or a step over. And then we can also just stop and continue the script from running. So step into essentially what it's going to do. In my case, the hotkey for this, because I'm in the Visual Studio configuration, is F11. This means I'm going to actually run into the main function. And now I want to continue to just move through this function one line at a time. And that would essentially be the step over statement. So if I hit well, F10 turns out to be the same hotkey as stopping the recording. So let's go through this and just do it through the menu. So I can say step over or step over statement, and it'll just move me down one line at a time. So we can move through this. At any point, if I'm done examining what's happening in this function, I can always step back out of it with that Shift F11. But what this allows me to do really is to examine any variables or anything that's happening as it's happening. So for example, if I step over this one more time, now I can put my cursor over this and I can see I have my manager object. I can actually right click on this and I can say add a manager to the watch. So the watch window is down here at the bottom left. And essentially what it does is it gives me the ability to open it up and I can examine all of the values of the variables within this object that I have. Um, yeah, so it's a really nice way if you have variables that might be changing and you want to watch the value of those, you can add them to your watch window as you step through code and see how things change. I can also, over here on the right-hand side, there's a Python shell. So this is just standard Python, the standard Python window. It's not going to be interacting with my code that I currently have. But if I go to the debug console, I can actually type like, print manager and hit run. So this is running the Python code with what's currently happening in my current session. I'll sometimes actually pause on a breakpoint here and just start typing experimental code here, figure out what type of code I want, and then copy and paste into here. So I'm almost using the active debugger to just test and make sure that my functions and calls that I want to make actually are doing what I expect. And then if they are, I might paste them in here. We also have a call stack to the right. The call stack is going to let me kind of see the how I got to where I am in my current line of code. So here I'm at the bottom. I could jump back to, um, there we go. A little delay there. We could jump back into the previous run function. We could jump in to see what called that code. That allows us to just kind of move through previous code that's run. And when I'm at that level, I believe I'm also seeing the values of variables at that time where those were. So a lot of flexibility there. Okay, so that's it. That's in itself is a huge one. Just the ability to pause code, check variable values, and debug code is gigantic. Once you're done and you want the code to continue, then you can simply just say continue, and now the code will finish the rest of the code that it was running. And you can see up here that we are currently connected, so there is a stop button. If I hit that stop button, it will actually disconnect us from Maya. So I generally just stay connected. I have found that there is a small performance hit. So if I'm actually actively like trying to work in Maya and doing some really heavy actual tasks for the day, I will not be connected. But if I'm on scripting mode, I might just stay connected for the whole session. Some other things to kind of note, and some of these features I should mention are only available in the Pro version. I think, for example, one of these that we can have here is conditional breakpoints, meaning I can right click on this breakpoint and say edit conditional breakpoint, and then I can break, add in some conditions. So maybe I'm going to do 3 mod 1 equals 0. A lot of times I'm going to say more like if this variable is true, set a breakpoint. And so that means the code will run and only stop at this breakpoint when that condition is set. And that is a great and valuable thing to have at your disposal. Some other really nice features here is the ability to kind of rename variables. So, you've written a lot of code and then you decide or you discover maybe you have a typo or you want to refactor the name of a class. I can simply right click on this, say refactor symbol. I can give myself a new name and hit enter, and it'll rename that in every location that it finds, which is listed down below for preview purposes. And I can uncheck areas where I don't want that to be the case. And of course, there are hotkeys for commenting or uncommenting your code. So if I select this, once again, because I have the Visual Studio hotkeys enabled, it's going to be Control K, then C. We'll do comments, or Control K, then U to uncomment. You can also do K and then, or sorry, Control, then K to add a bookmark to a specific location. Um, those hotkeys, once again, are going to be dependent on what your keyboard personality is that you have set up. All right, so that is Wing in a nutshell. There's obviously a lot here in the app, but those to me are the main things that I care about and that cause me to go to Wing all the time for when I'm scripting.